Good to go?
We're good to go. Let's just get 10 seconds of
All right, 10 seconds of silence off the top.
All right. We're just going to get 10 seconds of silence starting.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to the show. My name is Mo Waja, and I'm your host, and tonight we're talking travel, which is good because we are here with 4 of the top travel influencers in the world. Nora Dunn, better known as the professional Hobo, sold everything she had in 2006, including a robust financial practice, to travel the world, and she's still traveling to this day. Dave and Deb are the founders of the Planet D. They founded their brand in 2008 after cycling across Africa, and were recently listed as number 6 on the Forbes Top 10 Travel Influencers in the World list. Lastly, but certainly not least, we have Chris Mitchell, better known by his brand at travelingmitch. Chris semi-recently returned to Canada after visiting over 80 countries abroad. I am so excited to have all of you with me today here on the show. This is going to be great.
Awesome, thanks for having us. We're looking forward to it as well.
Woo!
Absolutely. No, this is going to be really good because I think we have a super unique opportunity here. We have a discussion on the concept of travel blogging, what traveling means on a professional level, and then again, what it's meant to get into this industry. First, when all of you started, and now more recently, Chris, when you got into the game, because things have changed. Things have changed on a marketing level, they've changed interpersonally, they've changed how you connect with people, and I mean, frankly, access to travel is so much greater now than I would guess and hazard it was when all of you started. So with that in mind, what I want to do is start by talking origin stories. Where did you all begin? So, I mean, Nora, since you kind of origined first, let's start with you.
Well, I was in Toronto, Canada in 2006. I was busy running a financial planning practice when the call basically was a lifelong dream that to travel the world immersively that I had largely been ignoring. And the call became louder and louder until I couldn't ignore it anymore. So in 2006, I sold everything I owned, including the financial practice and the car and the motorcycle and the skydiving gear and all the accoutrements of a comfortable lifestyle. And I took off to travel the world. I had no idea where I would go, how long I would even last at it, how I would make money along the way. I just knew I had to go. And on a wing and a prayer, and it's really a surprise to me as much as to anyone else that actually I lasted 12 years full-time travel on the road, traveling through and living in over 55 countries. I have recently returned to Toronto, and I have a home base here in Toronto, but I continue to travel at least half of every year.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, and I mean, you know, we're gonna get to all of the origin stories, but I have to ask right off the bat. I mean, that first decision. I mean, when you're selling things off, you're selling off everything you own, your business, your practice. What did that feel like?
Well, I felt like I was the only person in the world ever to do something like this. And I think we probably all did. I think to a point, I mean, in 2006, it wasn't really anywhere near as common a thing to do as it is today. So I didn't have the you know, today someone who wants to embark on a full-time travel lifestyle can get online and, you know, Google full-time travel and find a whole bunch of people, ourselves included, who are doing it, and you can learn how to do it. You know, you can get tips and tricks and even just confidence. When I did it, there wasn't really anybody online. There was no guidance online. So I did feel like a pioneer. If you know, I felt crazy actually. Let's be straight about it. But I also was pretty sure that this was something that I really needed to do. And what I wanted to do was volunteer around the world and climb the mountains of the world, do all the things that, you know, I was nervous to wait for a conventional retirement age to live my dreams of traveling the world because I was afraid that I would be unwilling or even unable to do those things. So for me, it was I knew I had to do it, and I'd hit that kind of like wall in my life where there were no other decisions to make except that one.
That's amazing. That's amazing. All right, Dave, Deb, the Planet D. I mean, when I was reading your bio, I mean, I read their bio initially before we started this conversation. I saw that you like cycled Africa. And I wasn't sure if that was a synonym for travel or you literally cycled Africa. But I mean, that seems wrapped up in the story. So how did you get started?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like that was sort of the thing that kicked everything off. Even though cycling the continent of Africa was it was sort of not really known to us that it was going to lead us into blogging. So, our original idea was we both worked in the film and television industry beforehand, and we were ready. We did want to get out, but it allowed us to travel. So we had already traveled to a bunch of countries before we cycled Africa, and we were always looking for a way to try and make travel a career. We almost bought a bar in Belize. We were going to be dive masters.
What else were we going to do? Cycling tours, even though we didn't cycle at the time. So all kinds of things. And then we finally said, hey, we worked in the film industry, so maybe we should pitch a travel show. So we said, hey, let's just pitch a show that 2 regular people can go and do extraordinary things. So that's what we did. We got a publicist. We got all kinds of press, and we trained for a year, and then went and we cycled from Cairo to Cape Town, thinking we were going to have a show the minute we got back. So we were like, yeah, we've been on Canada AM, we're running for the Toronto Star, we're doing awesome. And we got back and it fell flat. We were living in my parents' trailer at the time because, like Nora, we got rid of everything, thinking we wouldn't have to come back. And we started, we had to start a blog for the cycling. It was a race through Africa, so they said, can you guys start a blog just to keep people updated? And about 6 months later, we were like, this internet thing looks like it might take off.
I like that.
Maybe we should focus on that. And the one thing that people told us is they loved our idea when we were pitching the show, but we weren't a well-known brand. Like at the time, Jack Osborne had his show, and Bear Grylls had his, and Survivor Man, and they were like, well, who are you two?
Yeah.
So we said, we got to build our brand online. So that's how that came about.
So when we started going into it, when we made a decision to say, okay, we're going to go and we're going to travel the world for 5 years full time. And what we'll do is we'll try and make a business out of it. I don't know how we're going to do that, but but same kind of thing. Yeah. And we're like, but we'll give ourselves 5 years, and we'll go out there and make a go of it. So and the whole drive behind it was to build a brand. As we started out as Canada's adventure couple. That was our brand to begin with, and then we switched a little bit to because I found that we found that it was a little bit more or a little bit containing and being just Canada's adventure couple. So we're like, okay, well, let's change it to adventure is for everyone, because that's sort of what we're doing. The idea behind it that two ordinary people can go out there and do extraordinary things. So the 5 years actually turned into 8 years full time. So we were 8 years full time on the road, and even when I look back at it now, we probably should have come off the road a little bit earlier. Just the business grew very much faster, like so fast that you end up, but in the last 2-3 years, you're just so bogged down with not just the travel, but with the business side of things as well. So not that I would trade that in for anything for all those those last 3 years.
But it's more balanced now that we're back in Toronto. Like Chris and like Nora, we have a home base, but we still travel at least once a month. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, getting balance in our lives.
But now I have to ask right off the bat, because one of the things that makes you two unique in this conversation and in many of these conversations is that you're a couple at the same time. And I think that what I want to start with is that initial decision where you both have all these ideas, we can become dive masters, we can open up a bar. Many people, even nowadays where things seem more accessible, they struggle to overcome the initial inertia to make that decision. And especially if they're settled with a significant other. One of the two is usually kind of the voice of reason that says, no, you can't go open a bar in a completely different country. You don't know how to swim. How are you going to be a dive master? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. There's usually someone in this that does that, but you two so thoroughly supported each other in this journey that now, years later, you have one of the most successful travel blogging brands in the world. So that initial decision between the two of you to go off and having that kind of, ambition to do all of these things. What was that like?
I think it was because we took baby steps. And I always tell people, don't just jump into it if you're not ready. Like Nora did it because it was her calling. She was ready. A lot of people think that, I just need to go travel and take a year off with no plan. But we took baby steps. We traveled for almost 10 years before we went full in, and we traveled for 6 months at a time, 3 months at a time, 6 weeks at a time. And every time we traveled, we just realized more and more that we love this. So the first time we went away for 5 weeks to Thailand, we didn't say, let's make this a career. We just went, that was cool, and that had changed our lives. So it was like, it was one thing after another. And after a few years of doing it, every time we did something, we went, I want to be traveling the rest of my life. How do we make this work?
And I
so
think,
that's how we started brainstorming.
And timing was really right for us as well. Like we were both at the point in our jobs where we were like, okay, there has to be the change has to come at this point. You know, Deb didn't want to do what she was doing anymore, and I was at like the peak of where I was going to be at my job, so I would have needed to shift gears and go somewhere else if I wanted to continue to climb the ladder. So we were like, this is a perfect juncture to tackle what has over the past like 5-10 years become our real passion. You know, like when we were in the film industry, we were more known for talking about travel than doing anything with the film industry.
Most people in the movie industry would be like, oh, I'm on X-Men next, or this is my next big show, or are you doing Chicago? And we're like, we're going to take off and go to Belize next month. And oh, we're going to go diving up north this weekend. Like we didn't even care about the movies anymore. We were like, I'm done with that.
No, for sure.
And I also think that we're people of extremes. Like what I've learned over all the decisions that we've made in our life, we've been together for 28 years, you know, and it's like all the decisions that we've made are like, they're made, they're done, and we go and we do it.
We don't look
back. We're like, there's no wishy-washiness about it. It's like, this is what we're going to do. Boom, that's what we're doing. It's just the way things have been. And you take the good and the bad with that. There's stresses that come with that and great things that come with that. But, you know, inevitably, all those decisions that we made that way have led us to where we are now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Chris, what about you? How did you get into this scene?
Hold my breath for a while.
He's been waiting
It's been
for
tough.
this.
I'm not a very talkative guy, so I was fine with that. I was
The strong silent
quite
type at the end there.
Yeah, that's how everyone knows me. Very silent. I was really.
We don't like to talk about it.
Yeah, everyone looked very comfortable. I was panicked about having to speak. So the origin story for me is kind of, I think probably for all of us, it's a little bit, you sort of create a narrative afterwards, right? All you're doing at that point is sort of trying to do your best each day and see what happens. And then later you get to have present this grand narrative. So let's present the grand narrative. So for me, really, I had moved to Norway, and as you do, and I was living in the basically the old Olympic villages they converted to student housing. So I was living with 10,000 international students, which was the best because, you know, literally I came from Toronto, such a multicultural city, and I knew so many people from just so many different cultures, and it was great to be able to go over there, and I didn't feel intimidated because, you know, I met somebody from, I don't know, northern Germany, and I knew something about it. Not to say, you know, I had a class full of northern Germans, but I was familiar with a lot of different cultures, and I appreciated that. I really started the blog because my parents kept on asking me questions, some of which I didn't know how to answer, and I thought, why don't I create a nice polished answer on a website? And then my roommate at the time ran a blog as well, and I thought, this is so neat. And I was an English lit major, so I loved communicating, I loved sharing that. I just sort of kept that up in my travels. I lived in South Korea after that and wrote about that, and I just kept on writing everywhere along the way, and that sort of continued. And one thing I sort of thought about from that you guys were talking about is, at the beginning, really, it's about capturing your adventures, and then in a way, your brand turns to enable and empower others. You know, it stops becoming, you know, look at my story, because people don't want to keep, you know, harkening back to, oh wow, there's Chris doing something amazing again. You know, what you want to do is you want to empower other people and be like, hey, this is amazing, but guess what? Like, it's not because I am exceptional or amazing, it's because I've chosen to do this, and you can do this as well, and this is how. And I think that's something all four of us are pretty keen on in our brands, is empowering other people, and perhaps that's why it resonates, you know, with people. We hope, at least, I think.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Now, I mean, one of the things that I want to touch on from your story right away is, I mean, you started traveling the way that a lot of people start traveling. I mean, at least nowadays, where, you know, they seek through their education an opportunity to go abroad, to do something else, to get education in a different place. But most of those people do that and then come back to the real world and get, you know, a real job as a financial planner,
a real job
or something, you know what I mean, right? But the thing is that in your case, you caught the travel bug, but then you turned into this real functional thing that does connect with a lot of people. So, I mean, there's that balance of happenstance and intentionality when you look kind of retrospectively at these things. But when you were making this decision that, you know what, this trip to Norway wasn't enough, I'm going to go further and I'm going to make this a real thing that I pursue with passion. What was that decision making like for you?
Well, I think it's funny you think of it as a decision, because I feel like the decision was made for me, because I went over and realized this was so amazing, and I never resonated with the idea that, you know, I would sort of, I'm going to be really Canadian, I would hang up the skates, you know what I mean, and just say that's over. I got a certain fire from traveling, and the thing was for me, I went over initially, you know, in third university to continue my studies, and then realized that travel was education unto itself. And so I never felt like there was this, I think there's this strange dichotomy, particularly in North America, that you're either like working towards your life goals and travel, you know, and travel is what you do when you spend a week not working.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not what I understood travel to be. And so I sort of got rid of that, you know, what I felt was a poor classification, because then, you know, you go over to almost anywhere else, and, you know, in Europe, I think travel is a bit of a vocation unto itself, right? Like you take the time to go and travel, and that's part of your development. But I think in North America that's lost in some way. So, but I wasn't willing to compromise on that. And then I just thought life was too interesting. Traveling, I had all of these stories, and I was always a voracious reader, and I loved writing, and I almost sort of like every day I had stories to, like I would fall asleep with a smile every night, you know, and it was so fun. I remember like going on Skype, and I would talk to my guys, my buddies who were living in my house that I should have been living in when I ditched and went away to Norway for third year. And I was like, what's new? And no one ever had a good answer for it. Like no one had an answer like, oh, let me tell you. It was always like same. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I'm just saying like I couldn't deal with that answer. So and you know, and you have to be careful too, because you don't want to be like, well, how's your life? You don't want to be like, well, last night I stayed up till 3 a.m. with a whole bunch of French people, and we chatted all night about, you know, the significance of I don't know.
A fine wine.
Paris's impact on, you know, global culture. But anyways, whatever it was, I never had a dull day, and that felt worth continuing. So that was really it for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. So one of the things that I'm kind of hoping that we'll get to in this conversation is what I like to think of as a little bit of travel blogging real talks. Because the thing is that in today's world, with social media, with more accessible travel, I mean, the concept of kind of going backpacking and discovering yourself became popular a few years ago. But nowadays, there's a lot of people posting about travel, their travel, mindfulness on travel, any of a number of subjects surrounding the fact that they're getting away from whatever their life happens to be and going abroad, or for any other reason, right? But I mean, I think that with that comes a sense of unreality, that it's this really easy thing to suddenly pick up and just go. And there's no logistics required, there's no planning required. You can just go and you'll discover yourself in Narnia along the way, right? But I mean, having people like yourselves here who have done this and made a profession out of it, or at the very least, done this for a protracted period of time quite successfully, I mean, I want to get a sense of what that actually took. And I mean, I'll start with you, Dave and Deb, because I mean, in your case, I think there were almost many more logistics, if only because there are two people with separate careers, with things and assets and relationships going on, that now both have to pack up in sync and travel the world. So, I mean, break it down for me logistically. What's it like to be a full-time traveler?
It's no doubt about it. It's difficult. It's not an easy thing to do, to go out there and travel full time and go from one place to another. The logistics of getting from one place to another become mundane, really. Yeah, and it loses its this is why it loses its allure a little bit. You know, after doing it for so long, in the final 2 years or so before we actually moved back home, you know, the act of actually getting on a plane or getting on a train or a bus was just like, I do not want to do this. You know, it's just because it's like anything in life. If you do it to the extreme and you do it for that amount of times, there's going to be parts of things that become not exciting anymore. Exactly. So that part happens, but I think the underlying love of what we do always drove us to continue going. And I think having that base when we left, knowing that we were both on the same page about how we love travel and how we wanted to go out there and how we wanted to be our own boss and create our own business, like there's a business side of it as well, was really a big driving factor in us not only being a success, but staying on the road for so long.
Yeah, and I think for us though, like Nora, you have to be sure. Once you're sure, then it is easy. Like when you say travel is difficult, we make sure we tell people that, because I don't want people to just go in and think that the world is going to magically fall into place and all their troubles are going to go away.
Yeah, like you said, they're in Narnia all of a sudden. You know,
so
it's not like
travel
that.
doesn't solve all your world and life problems, but when you know you really want to do something, there was no question about it. People would think we were nuts and what are we doing, leaving our careers and selling our house, and we were like, no, this is what we want to do. So having a clear plan for us was really important. And then, we just had, I always said to Dave, if I could just find something that I love to do, I know I'd be a success. And I never found what I loved. I was always in jobs that seemed good on the outside, but I hated it, like inside my soul.
They're unfulfilling, yeah.
You know, and once I found what I loved, it was like, I don't care if it takes me 50 years to become a success, I'll keep doing this. And I never understood that. I was always like, how do people love what they do? And I didn't think it was a real thing. So having this career and getting to travel, I'm just in awe every day. Like, yes, the act of travel is hard. I hate getting on a plane, but I'm like, I love editing videos. I love writing. I love traveling. I love meeting new people. Yeah. So that's what you have to do. You have to get into it for the right reasons, not just for the money or not just for the quick Instagram photo. You have to do it because you love what you do.
And I think we were driven by our audience as well. You know, like it takes a lot to put yourself out there like that, to have a blog and write out in the public space, no matter who you are, to put your feelings and all that kind of stuff. Because that's how everything started when we were writing. We're writing about what we're doing every day and what we're,
There was no Twitter, Twitter was just starting.
Twitter was starting.
Yeah. No social media, so our blog was our Instagram stories. It was like, today I woke up and I had coffee on the beach. You know, it wasn't. Isn't it awesome? Yeah.
And we really did wear our hearts on our sleeves then, you know. And it's maybe as the business grows and gets bigger and we bring more people into the fold.
We let other people wear their hearts now.
Yeah, exactly.
You tell your story now. We've already done it.
We give other people a platform to tell their stories. And tell their inspirational stories, because we found what resonated with our readers is, being inspired to go out there to travel. So, we started an inspiration series where we got all these great stories from people about, what inspired them to travel and why they went and did that. So making a connection with our audience is something that continued to drive us every single day and get that reception back. The back and forth conversation that goes on, whether it be between comments or on Twitter or by email, was absolutely fantastic and continues to this day to be the main driving factor to keep the Planet D going, for sure.
But now you make a really good point there, right? And that's talking about the idea of your audience and connecting with your audience and how you got your ideas out there when Twitter was in its nascency, but things like Instagram, the big boom of Facebook, all of those platforms weren't accessible. I mean, they didn't exist. But at the same time, you both came at the media side of things very planfully. Like, this is something you wanted to do on a media level. But I don't know, in your case, Nora, it seems like almost more about you and your experience and your desire to go out there. So if we're switching gears slightly to the business of travel blogging, right? I mean, when we're talking about brand communication with audience, now you have a highly successful brand, the Professional Hobo. But is that something that came up right away? How did you start building intentionally that audience and that following?
The brand was definitely a natural process and an evolution. Because when I started travel blogging wasn't a thing. It was 2006. Travel blogs were glorified online journals, which is exactly what mine was at the time. And in fact, it wasn't even the Professional Hobo. It was a blog spot or a blogger, a free website, with an obscure name. And it was really just a way for my family and friends to, stay in touch with me. And to see what I was doing without me having to send out mass emails to people. That was basically it. The career for me that I started developing after I started traveling, it came shortly after I realized I'd had a lifelong penchant for the written word, and that plus a laptop and an internet connection could mean a career as a freelance writer. So my first endeavors online were developing a freelance writing career. And what I did was I parlayed my financial expertise, and I wrote about travel for finance publications, and I wrote about finance for travel publications, because in both cases you need money to travel.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a fairly
It's a good
natural evolution.
intersection.
Then somewhere in around 2008, I accidentally started an international NGO in Thailand. It's a long story. I won't bore you with it.
Accidentally
I know.
started.
Isn't it?
I like
Is
the
it a good tease?
accidentally.
Yeah.
I like
Oh,
the
you know,
accidentally.
it's just one of those things. It just kind of
Oopsie
happens.
daisy. Not again.
I made international news with this, and I was using my Blogspot website as a vehicle for donations, because my whole platform was that it was very briefly. It was in the aftermath of Cyclone Nargis, which obliterated Burma and left 2 million people without food, shelter, or water. And the problem was this was a country with closed borders. They were only accepting aid from certain countries, and I happened to be in Thailand at the time, and through various miracles, had the assistance of the Royal Thai Air Force in a C-130 Hercules military aircraft waiting to be filled.
Wow.
So I was raising money using my website to do that. So suddenly, now somebody other than Mom was reading my website. So fast forward a few months later, I thought, well, I should probably actually, get a little more serious about this whole website thing. And the Professional Hobo was born. Now, the title The Professional Hobo was born because when I started traveling, I started by traveling across Canada, and then I was living in Hawaii for about 6 months. And I used to be, and still am, an active Rotarian, which Rotary being a club dedicated to doing service work around the world. So I would walk into these Rotary meetings, and which are a great opportunity for a cultural exchange, but especially in Canada or in North America, very business-minded people would ask the premier question that everyone asks when they meet you: what do you do?
Yeah.
And I just sold everything. I was just traveling the world. I was kind of developing this writing career, but it kind of felt a little, I don't know, amateur. And I couldn't figure out how to define myself.
Right.
So literally, as a way to make fun of myself, I said I'm a professional hobo.
Perfect.
I love it.
Because I thought it was like the perfect oxymoron,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
I'm a professional hobo. Because you know what? I'm not just a homeless person. I look good doing it.
Yeah.
I love it.
And so the website, The Professional Hobo, was born. And then in terms of brand development, what was kind of unique was because, of course, I was writing both in the travel and the finance publication realms, my website married everything to teach people how to travel full-time in a financially sustainable way. So you were mentioning a little bit earlier how people sometimes people are wanting to get out there and launch themselves into Narnia, and then there are other people who want to travel, but they're the details kind of people. They're like, I want to travel, but I need to know, what kind of credit card should I have, and how do I organize my finances, and where do I get my mail, and how am I? I'm your man, woman. And my website really helps people with all those logistics to get them on the road feeling confident that they're, the financial and planner in me really never died. I really just found another way to express that planner in me and to parlay it into a new industry.
I think that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant because, it does create kind of that environment where it's not about leaving everything you are behind and building a new version of yourself, which, in a very real way, I think has become part of the popular narrative around what traveling is. It's about taking who you are, what you do, and adapting it to a new reality and a new environment.
Yeah.
And speaking of new realities, Chris, you got into travel blogging in a very different reality because while much of Nora's communication was through website, while Deb and Dave were doing this through Twitter in its nascency along with their own page. You got into travel blogging kind of as social media was growing in popularity, growing in adoption, and becoming the kind of multimedia powerhouse, or cesspool, depending on who you're talking to. That it is today, right? It's big. There's a lot of voices. It's loud, and it wasn't as loud before. But in spite of that, you've managed to carve out your own little piece of that pie and differentiate yourself from the quite literally millions of other people who are trying to do something quite similar. So, tell me about that.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of similar to what others have said in the sense that there are a lot of voices, but if you're coming at it from a place of vulnerability and authenticity, I think people really resonate with that. And I think that's sort of, not to make a grand socialist statement, but I think some of the people are having a bit of a hard time right now with social media in a sense because of that lack of authenticity. But I think at that time, people were were looking for a vulnerable story. And I wasn't saying, you know, in my when I was writing, I was sharing things I really felt. I wasn't saying, you know, here are 10 reasons why this city is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. I was talking about, you know, this is what I did over the weekend, and these are the things I really appreciated, and these are the things that had me thinking, and these are the things that I wasn't scared to you know, wax lyrical and to really share myself. And I think that's what people grabbed onto, and I relished that, you know, because then you start to develop that real connection, and then I started to understand, you know, the power of connecting with people. You can have real connections with people you don't even really know, you know, real conversations, and I think to a certain extent, the space we're in can feel lonely sometimes, but then sometimes it can feel like incredibly like there's like you can't escape the warmth, and I think it's a great thing. So I think in my case, it's kind of funny because I knew about some of their brands before I even started mine, but I didn't start my brand, so to speak, as even a brand. I started as a platform to speak upon, and then it was funny because I started to realize the power that my words could have, which is what I always hoped would happen, but I didn't know would happen. But I think because I went into it not knowing what happened, people resonated with that. Like I didn't, you know, you see people now, and it's like I have my 1-year plan. I'm going to start my Instagram account. I'm going to get to this amount. I'm going to do this, and that to get there. Like this was really organic, and I think we probably all share this sentiment. Like if you told me, like I still get this like weird feeling where I wake up sometime and I'm like, so when do I have to go back to real life? You know, it's like, but I'm at a point now where I'm really lucky and fortunate to not have to do that. But I don't forget that, and I think that still shines through my work too. You know, I work every day as if tomorrow could all end, and then it doesn't end tomorrow.
Yeah, that's funny because we were just talking about that yesterday, about how, you know, I always remember, I'm always reminding myself that, you know, how lucky we are to be able to do what we do and go the places that we go and have the business that we have and the friends that we have. And, you know, all of that is because of travel. You know, everything where we are now and who are our friends and, you know, our website, our business, who we are, travel so interwoven into everything that we do, you know, that we can't forget that that's where we came from, you know. So like when Deb was saying before, you know, we'll do this forever, you know, and people ask you, well, when are you going to retire? Well, why would I retire? I'm doing what
I'm living the best retirement ever. Like,
go back to work.
Don't you feel you already are retired? Like this is how I think the ideal retirement would be. I get to live the life as I want, but I still have a purpose. You know, it's not that I'm just going golfing every day. I make my own hours. I do my own work, and it's on my own terms. But there's purpose to it, and that's why I want to keep doing it forever.
Alan, I also think it's important to note that all of us have really grown our businesses organically, and they all started in one way and evolved into something else. But I'm not sure that it's still that environment today. Like today, I think if you want to have a successful travel blog, you do have to have a plan. And you've got to, I mean, I generally advise people who are interested in getting into this lifestyle not to do it the way that I did, which was to start developing the business concurrent to traveling. No, I always tell people, don't quit your jobs until you have the foundations of your online business established before you go. Because there's a huge learning curve and a lot of work in establishing yourself in this online world where there's a new travel blog born every 38 seconds. And trying to differentiate yourself. Exactly. It's
like people ask me, how do I do what you do? I'm like, I couldn't even tell you where to begin now. It's a whole different world.
You have to apply a science to it.
Yeah,
really, you have to apply that business
I admire
mind.
people like Chris who came in later and made a success out of it. Because Dave and I always said if we had to start, like you really started your blog, 2016? I know you've had it.
Yes, I had it in namesake really for a while, but 2016, late 2016 is when it turned into more than, you know, it turned into more than just an idea or a hope, and started to see some results around that.
See,
but
that's
it was
impressive, like because to be new in 2016 and stand out. It's amazing because it was easier for us. It really was. It's like all the people that started when we did. If they're still around, they're a success. You know?
Well, the industry kind of took us up with it, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we got the interviews. We were getting noticed.
We got everything. We had it so easy, you know. And then things we get on all the lists. Like it was hard in lifestyle because we weren't making money either. Like everyone didn't make any money for the first few years.
No.
So like it's different now. You can start a blog and make money in the first few months. Where
and I think
it was years for us.
That's why the spaces get so crowded, right?
Yeah.
Because now there's that notion out there that, hey, you know what, I can just go out there, be a travel blogger in 1 year, I'm making money, I'm traveling the world, it's awesome. And you can do that. That's the thing, you can do that, but you do have to have a plan, and you have to have some sort of baseline or something that is going to separate you from somebody else. And I don't know what that can be now. I mean, like I used to say to people, well, you should have a niche.
Do what you love.
Do what you love. And it's like, but that's not enough anymore.
I'm not sure.
In a crowded space, there has to be something out there.
You have to have
a leg up
and
somewhere.
Talent.
Yeah.
Like you do have to. You have to. I took writing courses before I don't have an English major, but you have to have skills.
Sure.
I didn't just go start writing.
Yeah.
And you were always a very talented photographer, even from the film industry.
Yeah.
You had that background. And I think that's really important. You need a skill. A lot of people are like, oh, I'll just use my iPhone. You need something. Like your photography stands out. I worked taking video editing courses and working on things. Every day I'm still trying to learn to stand one step ahead.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you need now more than just the niche and the dream.
I remember listening to Gary
That's
Vaynerchuk.
a very good point.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, right? And part of that is because I think that nowadays the reality is that most people feel that travel and becoming known on social media is such an accessible reality that the role of education and becoming educated, not only about the place that you're going to, but about the skills that are required to make you a success in whatever field that happens to be, it's kind of lost in the conversation. So I mean, and I want to refer that to, well, yourself, Nora, because you started, and then you, Chris, because you started as someone who was highly educated in a very different field. And I love how you've blended the two together, both early in your career and throughout. But I would expect that not just in the process of traveling, but in the process of then growing that brand, there's a learning curve. So on an educational level, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, the learning curve was, it was very organic for me because I had various forms of expertise that I was ultimately able to parlay into what I'm doing now. And actually I'm in a TED Talk.
Awesome.
There was a TED Talk by Emily Wapnick about having transferable skills and being able to, I forgot what she's got a name for it, but it's an idea of being able to take a look at what you're good at in life, even if you don't think that it's a career or if it's not something you went to school for, and being able to learn how to harness these to create the career, the lifestyle, whatever it is of your dreams. And I think that in this day and age, although we've all waxed poetic just now about how difficult it is to start a travel blog and to make it in the travel blogging industry, I also think that the internet is still a wild west, because I think that we're constantly redefining how we work, where we work. I heard a statistic that within a couple of years, 40% of the North American workforce will have the ability to be digital nomads.
Wow,
and
that was
really,
nothing when.
that was digital word. It wasn't even a word when we started,
Yeah.
and now look, it's an industry. And now there are various companies and organizations that are cropping up to facilitate this as an industry, whether it's helping to coordinate telecommuting employees and their companies, whether it's companies that provide housing in different places and transportation for digital nomads around the world. There's a variety of co-living and co-working spaces. That's a new thing. I always thought co-working spaces were kind of weird. It's like, I used to work in a cubicle.
I don't want to go there
So
now.
I'm like, I don't want to go somewhere and pay a lot of money to work in a cubicle. Like, I was like, no.
That's funny.
But of course, there's so many misconceptions about the industry. You cannot work on a beach. Okay, there's just so many different reasons
You
why
really
laptops
cannot.
and beaches do not go
My
well
favorite
together.
thing is when you're scrolling through Instagram and people are like, my office today. I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah, no,
You were there for 12 minutes. You sat down.
It's kind of like sex on the beach. It's not as good as everybody says.
That's a very fair point. That's a very fair point. Now, Chris, in your case, what I want to touch on is the educational side in terms of the travel itself, right? Because nowadays, especially since you started your travel blog more recently, right? There is that perspective that you can just pick up and go to a place. And I assume Google something along the way or hashtag that location and see what everybody else saw, right? But I mean, having visited and quite recently over 80 countries, what role did education play before you even, I guess, landed in any of those countries?
Do you mean in terms of like the research that I was doing to get
Sure,
there?
like what did you need to learn before being there in order to be successful? Not just as a blogger taking photos, taking images and putting those out into the world, but as an individual, as a traveler who is visiting this place and wants to see things beyond the regular 12 things that are on, I guess, some blog saying this is what you should see.
Yeah, so the first thing is I believe there is such a thing as doing too much research, and I think you want to go, like the sweet spot for me is to do enough research that I feel really comfortable heading to a place, but also I firmly believe you have to arrive in a place with humility. And understand that you're going to do a lot of learning there, and to arrive and think you're already going to get a good picture of what a place is like is really besides the point of traveling. So that's, for me, I always think about, I'll do the education I need, understand once I land, I don't want to arrive in a place and be like, oh, I was trying to like really leave it up to chance, so I have no idea how to get the hell to my hotel. I don't know how, you need to do some basic stuff, and I always try and learn a bit of the language. I feel like for me that's always just a respect issue. Especially when I first started traveling, like there wasn't this whole thing where you could be like, Google, tell me how to ask for a banana. Do you know what I mean? So like for me, it's that fine balance between going prepared enough that you can then act upon that humility, and engage with people. And I also feel like now, like especially now, arriving in a place and just actually, putting your phone down and all those apps that make travel so much easier, and actually going back and using the 8 words or 12 words or hopefully more, but using that and just focusing on that and seeing where that leads you. Because probably all of us, the amount of stories that I have that just were chance encounters that turn into something beautiful, because I also think as human beings, in general, like you can tell when someone is, putting their arms out and just saying, hey, I'm here and I'm willing to see what you're going to show me, and also being like, I'm not doing this because I have a phone in my pocket and I'm going to be like, okay guys, I'm here at this private wedding and we're drinking jasmine tea, it's like, that's not what it's about, right? It's about,
so good at that though.
I know. This is the next show, right? For me, jasmine tea with Traveling Mitch. But
I love it.
But legitimately, that's
I'd watch
it.
that. I'd watch that.
Yeah. Totally. If anyone wants to, produce that, but I think there's a lot of, I think despite the fact that I may have the blogging could have gotten into it in a formal way later, I think probably the way that we all started traveling is probably the same in the sense of that seed of trying to quench that curiosity, but understanding to be curious is to be vulnerable and to say hey, I'm willing to let you quench that curiosity. I'm not coming, I didn't read a Wikipedia page and I pretend like I, arrive in Thailand, I'm like, oh yes, that's the temple. Did you know in the 14th century that actually happened? Let somebody else guide you in that. There's somebody who knows that better than you. And you need to be open to hearing that and not just read. I've seen too much of people reading 8 sentences on Wikipedia and they open up on a video and they're like, guys, for years I've been studying and I'm here at the, and they put out the one fact, like in 1864, and it's like, you gotta know something with your heart, not with, with the 8 seconds of Wikipedia.
Well, there's that authenticity aspect that is so important when it comes to, any kind of media and any kind of personality that's being put out there nowadays. But now, vulnerability is an important point, because I think that's one of the things that brings all of you together, that you've all gone out there, gone into the world and been vulnerable and collected a lot of amazing experiences along the way. And I would love to hear about some of those experiences. Nora, I'm going to start with you because I want to hear about that NGO. So let's call this story time. But for each of you, either individually or together, in your case, the Planet D, but tell me about, I guess, something that really connected with you abroad. You don't have to tell the NGO story, but tell me a story about something that really connected with you abroad, an experience, a person, a conversation, something that really mattered in your 12 years of traveling.
Well, I'm extremely vulnerable on my website. I tell the stories that a lot of other travel bloggers and travel writers won't talk about. I talk about my experiences, with love and relationships on the road. I've talked about, I accidentally started the international NGO in Thailand, and then the next year I was in Australia's worst ever natural disaster, the Victorian bushfires in 2009, wow. And I was literally surrounded by fire. And if I were to tell a story, I would tell that one in that it was an amazing and terrifying experience all at once. I was living in small town rural Australia. The day when we woke up on that day, we knew there would be fires. The question was simply where and how bad. The temperatures were over 50 degrees Celsius, and the winds were 110 kilometers an hour. So it was, the candelabra that I had in my place had melted. So, and that's in the morning.
That's amazing.
It was
terrifying.
Amazing and terrifying. And I'm in very small town Australia, and it was, the morning was okay, and then I guess we saw smoke over there, and then the friend in the group of friends that I had befriended, one of them was a volunteer at the CFA, which is the County Fires Association, and the firefighters in rural Australia are all volunteers.
Wow.
So this guy was literally, he gets the call and says, "Come down, we're going to need you." And so we all go to the fire station. He gets his gear, and we all go to the fire station, because what else are we going to do? Yeah. And I'm listening to all of the calls come in. They're listening to the walkie-talkie go, Narberthong, the so-and-so mill, 20 people surrounded by fire, can't get out. Marysville, 3 houses, people surrounded by fire, can't get out. And it's just one after another of these stories. And basically what had happened was all these little fires had come up, little, and they were all moving with the winds this way, and they were still all separate fires, and then there was a wind change. And all of those fires combined into a 3,000-foot wall of fire that came back on itself and just absolutely obliterated a huge chunk of Australia. Wow. Or of Victoria. It was, and literally there was I saw it coming, not the fire, but the smoke. Mm-hmm. And by that point, I'd already headed back to my house. I'd just grabbed what few things I needed to grab, because I had a feeling that I wouldn't be going back there for quite some time. And I was evacuated for 3 weeks. But while I was sitting on my hands in this CFA fire shed, and the trucks are starting to go out, I'm thinking, well, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something more than nothing. And I whip out my notebook, and I start making notes. As every time, an announcement is coming through with something, I'm making a note at the time. And all the firefighters and all the guys who were working at the shed started to get into it. And they were like, "Hey, Nora, there's a new announcement, 210, somebody, da-da-da-da." So I'm helping, and I'm documenting what's happening as it's happening. And simultaneously, I'm documenting my experience. So long story short, I ended up evacuated from the place where I was living for 3 weeks while fires continued to burn across the mountain range that was my backyard. I was sleeping on pub floors. I was sleeping in living rooms of people whose houses hadn't burnt down. I was sleeping in the tent of there were 600 tents set up for Australia's paid fire association, who were constantly for weeks on end fighting these fires. And then also, because of my Rotarian experience, I ended up actually helping to set up the warehouse that distributed the goods from this that were being donated to the fire survivors. Now, this is where it became a really heartwarming experience, because the amount of stuff that was coming in for the fire survivors was unbelievable. And one story in particular, to give you an idea of how Australians came together in the face of such a tragedy. We get a call at 9 o'clock at night that we have to open up the warehouse because 2 trucks, semi-trailers, are coming in with goods coming from Darwin, which is a few days driving north. And the trucks come in, we unload all the stuff, brand new mattresses, brand new, like, it's not just old donated, t-shirts that are ripped, no, all brand new stuff. We unload it all. We say to the drivers, would you, can we feed you? Can we house you? And they said, no, we got to turn right back around and head back up there because there's more stuff for us to bring over. And the irony in this is Darwin at that very time was underwater in floods. Oh, man. And yet they still donated all this stuff to the fire survivors.
Wow.
Wow.
And my own little personal victory from writing all of that and being the correspondent, if you will, on the ground was that my account that I published on my blog, my diary, Victorian Bushfire Diary, actually became a part of the National Library of Australia as
wicked.
a piece of history.
Wow.
Wow.
Hey, awesome.
That's amazing.
So these are the
deserves
things
applause.
that can happen if you keep yourself open. You keep your eyes open, you lend a hand when you can, you make these relationships with people, and you develop these relationships with people, and then you have the ability to see how they can come together, and ideally not in the face of disaster. But sometimes it takes the hard knocks to really see people's true colors.
Absolutely. And with all of that, I mean, what I find almost the most impressive is that most people faced with that, if possible, would run away from the experience and run away from quite literally the danger. But in your case, I think it was that vulnerability element, that dedication to the experience and to the people that you were surrounded with that brought you right towards it. And that's truly amazing. Yeah. Truly amazing.
Definitely.
All right. Deb?
What would you say?
I was thinking of Jeeth.
Yeah, I was thinking of Jeeth.
Oh, then we'll do one.
It's almost like you guys are together or something.
Almost like we've been
It's
together.
incredible symbiosis. It's never would have guessed you would have taken the same story.
Exactly. Ours isn't a natural disaster. This is more of so this is good because we have very different stories then.
Exactly.
Because there's so many to choose from. But this was one we were in Sri Lanka several years ago, and at the time we really had our Lonely Planet with us all the time, just like looking up prices and stuff. And I remember saying, well, how much is a tuk-tuk from Hikkaduwa to the bank and the ATM? And it was like, I can't remember, 200 rupees something. So we were like, okay, I'll expect to hail a tuk-tuk and have him, quote 1,000. So we stop with tuk-tuk and we're like, oh, how much to go to the bank? He's like, 200. And we're like, wow, okay. We're talking to him and we're going down and having a chat back and forth. And then when he takes us back, we're like, can we hire you like whenever? Will you be around? Can we get your phone number and call him and I'll let you take on? And I don't want to tell the whole story, so there you go.
Yeah, so, and he's like, oh yeah, sure. So we got his phone number and we ended up using him the whole time we were there. But he was so giving. He was like, he was driving these women around who come to Sri Lanka every year, and they help, they give money to make shoes for villages. So they come there every single year to see the shoes are made and then take them out to the villages and give them to them.
So he started the charity.
Yeah, and they were giving the money.
It turns out that we have this tuk-tuk driver with the heart of gold because he's started a charity and he's been bringing us around. So he brings us to go and pick up the shoes. We go down to Gaul and pick up the shoes with them. And then we go to the school presentation with him where he presents, because these are kids in the jungle in Sri Lanka. If they don't have shoes, they're just running around in bare feet, and he does his presentation. Yeah, and he invites us as guest of honor,
And then we got along. So then he's like, I want you to come to my house, meet my family. Yeah. So we went to his house, met his family, had dinner. Again, took his phone number. We wrote about the whole experience on our blog.
And then we went to another.
Well, that was the one
that
was with the ladies from Finland.
Yeah, but he came and drove us there, and he was like, "This is the most incredible experience." We did a whole day with him, and he's like, I can't charge you for this because this was such a wonderful experience. Because we were like, can we hire you for the day? Yeah. And then he ended up driving us from Hikkaduwa to the airport. It was just the most incredible thing. And I remember when we wrote about it on our blog, he didn't have an email address.
No, he just had like a phone number.
So we just put the phone number on and said, like, if anyone needs a good tuk-tuk driver, give Ajit a call. And it was amazing because for several years after, we would get people emailing us saying, hey, we met Ajit and we hired him.
That's so cool.
So, like, that was
he
really
says
cool.
to say hi,
So that was a pretty amazing experience.
You know what I almost find like the most beautiful about that, beyond the deep relationship that you can get with someone who really is providing a service, something that a lot of us, myself included, often overlook, the opportunity to connect with someone who we've hired to do a very specific service. It's that, being somebody who works and has worked in the not-for-profit sector, it's very easy kind of intellectually to pigeonhole yourself into believing that it's primarily people from, the UK or the US, North America in general, who are generating these really important, crucial, paying it forward moments for other people around the world. And it's just easy to forget that sometimes it is
right
just
on the
a
ground.
tuk-tuk driver with a heart of coal, doesn't have a website, doesn't have an email address, just has a phone number.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who's
Exactly.
changing the world for so
Yeah.
many people. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So
Chris?
yeah, 2 really non-emotional stories to follow up from. So I'll have no problem knocking this out of the park. There's not much
If we know you
sentimentality at all.
No pressure.
Imagine like I was having drinks one time in Thailand. That's it. Well, for me, it's funny because when you guys are talking, I have so many stories.
makes you think about it.
Cycling through my head, and it's just struck as really grateful to have had so many experiences to be able to choose the story. That's a real honor, right? So for me, it's not really necessarily one story as much as just my experience in Istanbul. I moved there in 2014 to a city that was, for all intents and purposes, everyone just thought of it as like an in-travel destination, and it was. But what I didn't know when I moved there was on the brink of being radicalized in a way by someone in power who was trying to really, we'll say, consolidate power by through a number of means. But I think that what I was going to say was I was really integrated into Turkish society. I lived there for 3 years. As I said, I spoke, reasonably fluent Turkish. At least like here, I can go to a restaurant and have a conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe but like the people I met there were so like pumped up that I was learning the language. But really, just that's the way I tried to. Like you talk about getting these opportunities to go deeper. There was a guy who had a restaurant just down the street from me. I used to go to all the time. He only spoke Turkish, but my parents came to visit, and we sat down for a meal. And he sat beside me and put his arm around me, and he goes to my parents. He's like, "Chris, he's my brother." And my parents are like, who is this man? But like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
This is incredible, and that those sorts of experiences happen. Like my barber, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, for me, in 2016, things got pretty rough in Istanbul, and there were a lot of bombings and things going on. And like, I don't want to get into the politics of that, but I was at a friend's wedding reception, and we saw one of the bombings that happened beside Beşiktaş Stadium. It unfortunately, I think there were something like 150 casualties or something like that. We watched it happen, and then we watched reports fill the phone. Like, this is what's happening in Istanbul, and you're struck by what do you do? And we watched the police cars stream across Taksim Square down towards Beşiktaş Stadium. Keep in mind, I'm a Beşiktaş football fan. I've been to the stadium many times.
Oh man.
And and we've been in Machka Park, which is kind of near where it happened and everything like that. And you're just sort of stunned. I ended up sort of talking to CNN about it and things like that. And I was happy to have a platform because I wanted to share. My parents my parents never forced me to try and leave, but people kept on messaging me and saying, "Why are you still there? Why are you still there?" And I was saying, because there's another side of the story. I was like, you see the bombing, I see the next day when people get up and they open their shop again and they're resilient and everyone has a look. And nobody says anything, but you look at each other in the eyes and you say, "I'm here and I'm not leaving," because then they've won. And the power of the city was incredible. Yeah. And I ended up writing a piece called "Reflecting on My Second Home" that this year is up for Best Opinion piece at the Traverse Awards.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
But all that to say, I shared a vulnerable story. I said, I don't know what the right decision is, but this is what I see, and don't forget that, when you're painting this city with the color, there are people with stories here who are fighting, fighting a fight on a number of sides. But sometimes you have to be that person to try and to tell people. When people keep messaging you, eventually I could just send the article back. I'm in the process of figuring this out, but I'm not going to. What does that say? It's not like you abandon a place and then you're like, well, okay, well, that was fun. It's like I lived there for 3 years, and you get to know these people, and you start to feel for these people. You carry places with you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's why that's what comes to mind for me.
No, that's really touching. And I think, it's that idea of being connected to these places, carrying them with you. And I mean, even in all the complexity of that story, I think the thing that almost stands out the most to me is the idea that when you go to a place, you take the time to learn a language or learn a bit of the language, because there's so many people, myself included, who would travel and then be reticent to try because you don't want to, you frame it as, I don't want to insult the person's language by butchering it, but really it's embarrassment or unwillingness or sheer laziness that brings it all together. Now, I have one more question for everyone before we wrap. And that's because at the end of the day, what I hope is that from people who see this conversation, that they will be able to take something from it. We'll take many things from it, but take at least one thing specifically and help their own career, their journey, their life, their travel experience. So I'll ask it from the standpoint of travel blogging and getting into that industry because, I mean, like you said, there's a new travel blog every 38 seconds, right? If you had, each of you will go in turn. Chris, we'll start with you because you were talking last.
Yeah, you've been at the end the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. It's been really tough. I'm still with the presents.
Isn't your cat from Turkey?
Yeah, my cat's. I
brought.
See?
Brought Turkey home with you.
I brought home my
it stays with
Turkish
you.
kitten.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's happy. He's a happily.
That's beautiful.
I thought that
he's
was
the expat now.
Yeah. So if you were to give somebody who was a nascent travel blogger, someone who wanted to get into the game, one tip to make them more successful or successful at all, really, what would that be?
So I think on a macro level, I think you can do anything you put your mind to if you're in it for the right reasons. And I think for me, that's what I would say. If you are really strongly attached to travel and you want to share your story, I think you forget about the travel blog start every 38 seconds and realize that your travel blog will be started. And that's enough. But you need to make sure that you understand that if it's not your true desire and passion, it's like a car, you have a finite amount of gas. But if it's your real passion, the gas may wane a little bit at times, but your tank will never run out. And I think that's it for me. I'm comfortable chasing this dream, and I still think about it as chasing a dream, because there's always more to do, more to grow. I mean, I'd be reticent to not mention that the reason we've all become closer is because, I helped to start the Toronto Bloggers Collective, which has brought, sharing these stories and brought people together and realizing that, we can all help each other grow. But I think the primary thing that strikes it to me is the people who have quote unquote made it, and I really put quotations around that because making it so different to every person. It's the passion leads the process, and if that passion's real, then that fire just doesn't go out. So that's what I would say. If it's something that's calling to you, you chase it, and you can make it. You can, but understand that you're gonna. The gas is going to be on empty at sometimes, and a lot of people just, I love metaphors obviously, but a lot of people don't. They just don't fill the tank, right? Yeah. And if you're going to, then you can do it. But it has to be there. It has to.
100%. Deb?
I'm really glad you asked this because I did say earlier about when I went, I don't know how anyone would start, because it's very different for everyone's journey, but it ends up being the same because when we started, there was no career. So we started when there wasn't even a thought. Like people were like, what are you doing with your life? You're just running around the world chasing this dream of nothing. We were like, I honestly don't know, to tell you the truth. And at least now there is a blueprint, and Chris really hit on it, because even though it's really saturated, if you know what you want to do with your life, if you make that decision 100% and you go, I love this and I'm going to do whatever it takes, you can be a success. You just have to put the hard work into it. And I think that's the thing. You just have to make sure, I don't need to repeat because everything Chris said, just make sure that
thanks.
Yeah. And then on top of that, really, we'll just try to add each little bit.
Sure.
Really get to hone your skills, really learn everything you need, because we didn't know what we were doing when we started. We just read books, read posts, read everything we could, attended conferences. Yeah. And I think that's a really big thing to do, learn as much as you can. And just, if you know you want to do it, don't give up. Because it takes people different times all the time. Like Helen Mirren made it as an actress really much later in life than, Jodie Foster. But, they both are very successful. So that's the thing. Your success will come when the time is right.
Can I just add one thing and just say, it does take a tremendous amount of hard work. And I think it's the one thing I wanted to point out, I think it's really easy today if you follow some people where it's just like this Instagram effect and you assume like people are all working on the beach and stuff. I mean, it's countless hours behind a computer screen if you care about your product. Editing takes a long time. I always joke, the reality is that it's not the hammock and the beach and the laptop, it's me and a pair of basketball shorts with a cat. And that's really it. But when you put in the work on that side of things, it pays off in other ways. Yeah. But it's a tremendous amount of hard work. I don't want to ever belittle that. I'm still putting in long weeks, but it's okay because it's what I want to be doing. I don't have, it used to be, I was teaching before, and I actually loved it, so I never was like, oh, I really wish I wasn't teaching right now, because I found real joy in that. But I think if you tackle head on the thing that is always in the back of your mind that you only got to do when you were too exhausted to truly think, then you get a real opportunity when you wake up in the morning and you get to decide what you do first, and that first initial spree of energy is spent on something you're dedicated to. The results, I think, could be staggering, because it's something you're used to doing when you're not doing what you should be doing in real life.
Right.
So
That's brilliant.
I didn't mean to bring that over here, or steal from your point. There's a lot of overlap, I should say.
That's it.
Dave?
Yeah.
I would say foster a relationship with your audience and realize that travel blogging is a conversation. It's not, you're not going to build an audience with a megaphone. It has to be a conversation between you and your readers. So in the very beginning, whether it's an audience of 1 or an audience of 1 million, you have to find a way to communicate with them. And a lot of times nowadays, it's either an email newsletter, or it can be through Instagram, or it can be through social media. But foster those conversations that are real, because I think that's what gets lost a lot today in all the noise that's out there, is that it tends to be a lot of people talking at you and not a lot of people listening and creating a conversation. So whether it be through your posts on Instagram, or it be your Facebook posts, or your blog, or your videos, realize that there's somebody else out there reading that who's interested in starting a conversation with you. So do what you can to foster that from the very beginning, and you'll realize that you'll build such a faithful audience and a faithful base to continue your business on, that they'll always be with you, because you're always listening and you're always giving them advice, and they realize they're not just talking to a website, they're actually talking to a person.
Yeah, build that newsletter and foster that audience, because then it doesn't matter what the algorithm does. Then it doesn't matter if social media goes away. You have those really people that are dedicated, that come back all the time, that send you those emails and say, hey, thanks for that tip. I booked the other day from what you mentioned.
Superficial numbers mean nothing if the algorithm changes and nobody's paying attention. But if you have a dedicated core audience, then those people will stick through you through thick and thin. It's just amazing to me how, even from when we started to where we are now, though, there's people that have followed our journey from the very beginning. And those people are always the first people to support us in everything that we do. No matter how algorithms have changed, or Instagram came about and Facebook and all that kind of stuff, those people are always there supporting us. And I think that came from us talking to people and creating a conversation with these people in the very beginning and telling them that they matter. So your audiences, you have nothing without them, period. You have nothing without your audience. So think about that every time you post a picture, every time you put up a blog post. Think about who you're talking to.
I love it. I love it. It makes the entire concept of the social media brand very relational. And I agree. That's super important. Now, Nora, I assume you're going to tell us how not to run out of money.
Well, kind of, actually, through personal examples. So first of all, I want to echo what everyone said. You need to have passion. You need to develop the skills. You need to develop relationships. And I'd like to think that I certainly started out with all those ingredients. What I learned a couple of years ago was actually that there's another very crucial ingredient to this mix, and it's that you have to treat it like a business. And somewhere along the line, although I thought I was treating it like a business, I wasn't. I was treating it like the passion creative project that I wanted it to be, and I was ignoring the aspects of the business that I didn't want to pay attention to. I'm not an analytical gal. I don't like Google Analytics. I don't like SEO. I don't like any of this stuff that I don't understand. And a couple of years ago, I realized I was years behind the game because of it. And when I took a look at my website and the foundations and that where I, in terms of various numbers, domain authority, backlinks, blah, 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 I should have had 5 times more traffic and thus income than I had. And I found myself realizing that, in fact, actually, I owned a job, I didn't own a business. Because I was working full time, making relatively little money, in this hamster wheel, trying to keep this creative project, passion project going without actually treating it like a business. And so I had to make some very tough decisions. I had to learn some things that I didn't want to learn. I had to, and I chose not to reinvent the wheel. I had to hire people, and it took an investment of time, of effort, of money. to get myself to the point where I once again owned a business and not a job. And for anyone who's starting a travel blog in this current climate, yes, you need the passion. Yes, you need the audience. Yes, you need the skills. And really monumentally so, you need to treat it like a business.
Excellent point.
I was actually kind of horrified when I took a look at my readers who had been with me since the beginning, and I took a look at the percentage of my overall traffic that these people are. It was minimal. I wasn't getting paid by these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was getting paid by the people who were organically finding me through search. And what I needed to do was I needed to exponentially grow that number. So there's a lot of ingredients that go into it. So finally, the last point to bring it all together, don't reinvent the wheel. Go out, don't try to do it all yourself. You can't. Outsource the things that you can't do. Learn the skills that you can. Take the courses, read the books. Learn from other people who have made the mistakes and learn, we've all stumbled our way up the learning curve as the curve was developed. So learn from people like us, learn from other people who have the products and services to help you become a successful travel blogger in the industry.
I was talking to some bloggers who were newer than us, younger than us, about a year ago, and they were saying the minute they had enough money to hire someone, they did.
Yes.
We were.
And that was the best decision they ever made.
We were 8 years in, going, maybe we should hire somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
I sleep 2 hours a night. This is killing me.
And I was like, if only I thought that way at the beginning, because I was like, good for you. And then they grew so much faster than we all did in the early days. We were all just running around on our own.
We were just writing the little stories that we like to write and developing an audience, and boom, there we were. But the industry is much more sophisticated than that now.
Yeah.
And so you've got to treat it that way.
That's amazing.
Now we hire everybody.
Hire me.
Not everybody. We hire a lot of people.
Now I'm like, I don't know anything about Pinterest. I need a Pinterest expert.
Our team is much bigger now.
I don't know
than it was
anything about
a couple
a
years
city.
ago.
I need someone to write that for me.
No, that's very fair.
Yeah.
That's very fair. And those are salient points all around. I mean, you need the passion, you need the hard work, you need the education experience, you need the relationship building. And the thing is that, travel blogging isn't new. It's been done. The difference is, how are you going to differentiate yourselves, knowing what you know and taking advantage of what other people know as well. Well, friends, that's a wrap. That was Chris Mitchell at Traveling Mitch. See, Chris, you're first. You're first. Dave and Deb from The Planet D and Nora from The Professional Hobo. This has been amazing. Thank you for tuning in.